My beloved child, there is something about your soulmate that you have not seen clearly yet, and once you understand it, several moments that felt confusing may suddenly make sense. The secret is not about someone else, and it is not about a hidden betrayal or anything meant to frighten you. It is something deeply connected to you, to the way your presence has affected their thoughts, their emotions, and the way they see the possibility of love. Your soulmate may have been carrying a truth they have struggled to put into words because admitting it would mean becoming vulnerable in a way they are not accustomed to. And here is where this story becomes much more interesting. The part they have kept quiet may involve a realization about you that they never expected to have. Perhaps they once tried to convince themselves that you were simply another person they could eventually forget, another connection that would fade with time. But something did not fade. Your memory remained. Certain conversations stayed in their mind longer than they should have. A particular expression, a small gesture, a moment when you showed genuine care, something seemingly ordinary may have become extraordinary in their memory. They may not have told you this. They may not even have fully admitted it to themselves. But deep inside, they began recognizing that your presence touched a part of them that other people could not easily reach. And that is why the secret matters. It is not simply that they think about you. It is that they may have discovered something about themselves because of you. Something they were not ready to face before. Something that makes the connection feel far more meaningful than they originally allowed themselves to believe. But there is another layer to this, and this is where you need to listen carefully, because the most powerful part of the secret may not be what your soulmate has been thinking. It may be what they have been realizing. Imagine someone quietly replaying a moment between you two, wondering why it still carries emotional weight long after the moment ended. Imagine them remembering your words and suddenly understanding them differently. Imagine them asking themselves why your absence feels noticeable, why certain things remind them of you, or why they keep comparing new experiences with the feeling they associate with you. They may have tried to dismiss these thoughts because acknowledging them would require honesty. And honesty can be uncomfortable when someone has spent a long time protecting their emotions. Your soulmate's big secret could be that you changed their definition of what a meaningful connection feels like. Before you, they may have believed that love was mostly about attraction, excitement, or simply finding someone compatible. But your connection may have challenged that belief. You may have shown them that being understood can feel more powerful than being admired, that emotional safety can be more memorable than dramatic moments, and that one sincere conversation can stay with someone longer than 100 shallow interactions. The surprising part is that they may have realized this only after stepping back and looking at the connection from a distance. Sometimes people understand the value of something when they finally have enough silence to hear their own thoughts. And perhaps that is why the energy around this connection has felt so unusual. The silence may not mean the story ended. The distance may not mean the feelings disappeared. Sometimes silence reveals what noise was hiding. Your soulmate could be discovering that what they felt around you was not as temporary as they once assumed, and that realization may be the very secret they have struggled to express. Now listen to this next part, because there is a reason the truth may have remained hidden for so long. Your soulmate may be afraid that if they reveal how deeply you affected them, everything between you will suddenly become real. As long as feelings remain unspoken, they can be analyzed, questioned, delayed, and pushed into the background. But the moment someone says, You mattered more to me than I admitted, there is no comfortable place left to hide. That sentence changes everything. And perhaps your soulmate has been standing at the edge of that realization, wondering whether you would understand, whether you would believe them, and whether you still feel anything at all. There may be a particular fear behind their silence. What if you have already moved on? What if they finally find the courage to reveal the truth, only to discover that the person they quietly carried in their heart no longer sees them the same way? That possibility can make someone hesitate. It can make them observe from a distance, remember privately, and wait for a sign that the door to honest conversation is still open. And this is where the secret becomes surprisingly personal. They may not simply be wondering whether you love them. They may be wondering whether they are still worthy of being loved by you. Something about your connection may have forced them to confront their own insecurities, their unfinished emotional patterns, and the parts of themselves they usually keep hidden. You may have become a mirror without ever intending to be one. Through you, they saw qualities they wanted to strengthen and habits they needed to change. Through knowing you, they may have begun asking a question they avoided for years: if I truly want something meaningful, am I ready to become the person capable of protecting it? That question can transform a person. And if your soulmate has been unusually quiet, reflective, or difficult to understand, there may be much more happening beneath the surface than you realize. And just when you think you understand the secret, there is one final detail you need to hold on to, because it could completely change how you interpret the entire connection. Your soulmate may have realized that the thing they miss most about you is not your appearance, not a specific conversation, and not even a particular memory. They may miss who they were when they felt understood by you. That is a much deeper realization. People often remember someone because of what that person gave them, but sometimes they remember someone because of what that person helped them discover within themselves. Maybe around you, they felt more honest. Maybe they felt less pressured to perform. Maybe they could speak without carefully measuring every word. Maybe they felt seen without having to explain every part of themselves. And if that is what your soulmate secretly remembers, then the connection may have left a much deeper impression than either of you understood at the time. But do not assume the story ends with this realization. It may actually be where the most important chapter begins. Because once someone recognizes the value of a connection, they eventually have to decide what they are going to do with that knowledge. Will they continue pretending it meant nothing? Will they finally acknowledge what they have been carrying? Will they reach for honest communication? Or will they remain silent because vulnerability feels easier to avoid than truth? Your soulmate may be approaching that exact emotional crossroads. And there is something else they may have never told you: you were not as easy to forget as they expected. That single realization may be the hidden thread connecting everything. The distance, the memories, the hesitation, the unanswered questions, and the strange feeling that something about this story remains unfinished. But the deeper secret is still waiting underneath all of it, because your soulmate may have discovered something about your connection that even they did not expect to discover, and that is where the real revelation begins. There is a moment your soulmate may have replayed more times than you could ever imagine, and what makes it powerful is that you probably never realized how much that moment stayed with them. It may have looked ordinary from your side: a conversation, a glance, a goodbye, a simple sentence, perhaps even a moment when neither of you said much at all. But somewhere inside your soulmate, that moment became a reference point. Whenever they questioned what this connection actually meant, their mind somehow returned there. And perhaps they have wondered why something so small could leave such a lasting impression. The answer may be connected to the secret they have been keeping from you. You reached them without trying to reach them. You did not need to convince them, chase them, or prove your worth. Something about your natural presence bypassed the defenses they normally used around people. That may be exactly why this connection became difficult for them to categorize. They could understand attraction. They could understand friendship. They could understand temporary excitement. But what happened between you may have felt different because it touched something quieter and more personal. Your soulmate may have realized that they could distract themselves from thinking about you, but distraction was not the same as forgetting. They could fill their schedule, talk to other people, focus on responsibilities, and continue with everyday life, yet certain memories would still return when everything became quiet. And perhaps the strangest part is that they may have started noticing how often life reminded them of you. A familiar phrase. A place. A song. A random detail that nobody else would understand. Suddenly, your memory appears without invitation. They may have asked themselves, why does this person still have this much space in my mind? And that question may have led them toward an answer they were not prepared to accept. What they discovered next may be the part they would have the hardest time admitting aloud. They may not simply miss you, they may miss the possibility of what the two of you could become. There is a difference between missing someone's presence and imagining a future that never fully happened. The second one can be much more powerful because it creates unanswered questions. What if we had spoken more honestly? What if timing had been different? What if one of us had been brave enough to say what we really felt? What if that connection was not random after all? These questions can quietly occupy someone's thoughts without anyone else knowing. And your soulmate may have been carrying exactly this kind of private curiosity. They may have imagined conversations that never happened, rehearsed words they never said, or wondered how you would react if they finally revealed everything they kept hidden. Perhaps they even imagined you looking at them and asking, "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" And they would have no simple answer. Maybe they were confused. Maybe they were protecting themselves. Maybe they were waiting until they understood their own emotions. Or perhaps they were afraid that saying too much too soon could change the connection forever. But now something may be different. The more time passes, the harder it becomes to pretend the connection meant nothing. And this is why the secret has become so significant. It is not merely a hidden feeling. It is an internal realization that has been growing quietly. Your soulmate may have started understanding that some connections do not disappear simply because people stop talking about them. Sometimes the silence gives those feelings room to become clearer. And the clearer they become, the more difficult they are to dismiss. Here is the part you may not expect. Your soulmate could have discovered that you represent something they have been searching for without knowing how to describe it. Not perfection. Not some fantasy. Something much more human, a feeling of being genuinely understood. Perhaps there were moments when you listened without judging, noticed details others ignored, or made them feel that they did not have to become someone else to be accepted. Those moments might have seemed insignificant to you, but to someone who rarely feels truly understood, they can become unforgettable. Your soulmate may have realized that this is what made you different. You did not simply make them feel excited, you made them feel seen. And once someone experiences that, they can begin recognizing its absence everywhere else. Suddenly, ordinary conversations feel different. Superficial connections feel different. Even their own behavior begins to look different. They may start asking themselves why they held back with you, why they allowed uncertainty to speak louder than honesty, and why they did not protect something that mattered. That realization can be emotional because it forces a person to look backward without being able to rewrite the past. Yet perhaps your soulmate is not meant to remain trapped in the past. Perhaps the purpose of realizing the secret is to understand what must change moving forward. If they ever approach you again, what they bring cannot simply be old words. It would need to be greater honesty, greater emotional maturity, and a willingness to communicate instead of leaving everything hidden behind assumptions. Because your connection deserves clarity more than endless guessing. And perhaps that is exactly what your soulmate has slowly begun to understand. But there is still one layer beneath everything they have realized, and this may be the most emotional part of all. Your soulmate may secretly wonder whether you ever felt the same depth that they felt. They may wonder whether you remember the little things. Whether you ever replayed the conversations. Whether your heart ever paused when their name appeared. Whether you ever looked at the connection and thought, there was something different here. They may have no idea what your answer would be, and that uncertainty could be the reason they have kept so much inside. Because revealing a secret is easy compared with revealing it and receiving silence in return. So perhaps they have been waiting, not necessarily for a perfect sign, but for enough courage to stop hiding behind uncertainty. And if you have ever wondered why your soulmate's behavior seemed inconsistent, remember this: people can be certain about their feelings and still uncertain about what to do with them. They can care deeply and still struggle to communicate. They can miss someone and still hesitate to approach them. Human emotions are rarely as simple as the stories we tell ourselves. But one thing may be becoming increasingly clear to your soulmate: you left an imprint they cannot honestly pretend was never there. And once that realization settles deeply enough, the question changes. It is no longer, did this connection matter? The question becomes, what am I willing to do about the truth I finally understand? That is the question your soulmate may now be facing, and the answer could reveal why this secret has remained hidden for so long. Something has been changing quietly inside your soulmate, and you may never have seen the moment it began. It may have started with one ordinary memory that suddenly felt different. They remembered something you said, but this time they understood the meaning behind it. They remembered the way you looked at them, but instead of dismissing it, they wondered what you were trying not to say. They remembered a moment when you could have walked away emotionally, yet somehow you remained present. And that is when a difficult realization may have entered their mind: perhaps they misunderstood you all along. Maybe they thought your silence meant you did not care. Maybe they interpreted your distance as a lack of interest. Maybe they assumed you had already moved forward while they were still trying to understand what they felt. But the more they reconsider everything, the more certain details may begin connecting. Your soulmate could be realizing that some of the things they once interpreted as indifference were actually your way of protecting your own heart. And suddenly, old memories begin carrying completely different meanings. That is one of the strangest things about emotional connections. Sometimes the truth does not change, the understanding of the truth changes. A sentence that once sounded ordinary can become meaningful months later. A goodbye that seemed final can suddenly feel incomplete. A small gesture can become the detail that someone remembers when everything else fades. And your soulmate may be going through that exact process right now. They may be looking backward and recognizing that you were communicating more than they understood at the time. Perhaps you were waiting for them to notice. Perhaps you were simply being yourself. But there is another realization something about you may have remained quietly unforgettable, and it may explain why your soulmate may be realizing that they were not as emotionally detached as they once believed. They may have discovered that their biggest obstacle was never the connection, hardest to explain. It was themselves. Your soulmate may have tried to replace the feeling of your connection with something easier to understand. Perhaps they did not know how to communicate what they were feeling. They may have told themselves that enough time would make everything disappear. To keeping control. And your they may have convinced themselves that meeting not neatly organized, becoming busy, or focusing on other priorities with naturally erase the emotional weight of what obvious and vulnerability could be avoided. But instead of disappearing, you may have brought them face to face with something much deeper. This is not about saying nobody else actually wants that one person is magically destined to replace every other relationship they usually kept hidden. It is about something much more human. Sometimes your soulmate may have discovered that every new connection teaches them something about what they actually do not yet know how to handle responsibly. And when they compare those experiences with what they felt around you, they may notice the greater maturity in thinking. Perhaps conversations with others are the way I understand but they do not carry the same depth. Would I have acted differently? Perhaps someone else can make them laugh, followed them more than you realize, them feel as understood. And perhaps the secret they have never confessed is that they regret not being more honest, cannot create the same sense of emotional familiarity, past, but because they know they realization can be surprisingly powerful because it forces someone to stop pretending they are searching for something completely different to ask. They may wish they had said what they actually meant instead of expecting you to understand not silence, not perfection. They may wish they had given the connection a fair chance to become something real instead of allowing confusion where two people can actually be themselves. And that realization is not about guilt. Your memory keeps appearing inside that definition. Your soulmate may finally be understanding that meaningful love requires courage. Your soulmate may not simply be remembering not dramatic gestures, they may be realizing that the qualities they associate with you are qualities they genuinely show up consistently. And once a person understands that, becomes much harder to treat an old connection. Your soulmate may have secretly wondered whether you were waiting for them to become the person they needed to be before returning to your life. They may have asked themselves whether you would even recognize the changes inside them. Perhaps they imagine meeting you again and noticing the difference immediately. Maybe they picture a conversation where they finally say what they could not say before. Not some perfect speech. Not a dramatic confession. Just honesty. I understood your value too late. I did not know how to express what I felt. I thought I could move on without looking back, but I kept learning why our connection mattered. Those words may exist only in their imagination right now, but the fact that they can imagine saying them reveals something important. They may no longer be running from the truth internally. And that is a major shift. Because before someone can communicate honestly with another person, they usually have to become honest with themselves first. Your soulmate may be reaching that stage. They may be accepting that you mattered. They may be accepting that the connection changed them. They may be accepting that some questions still remain unanswered. And perhaps the most surprising secret of all is this. They may not be trying to figure out whether they ever cared about you anymore. They may be trying to figure out whether they are finally brave enough to admit just how much you meant to them. And that realization opens the next door, because there is one specific truth your soulmate may have been keeping even deeper than all of this, a truth connected to what they secretly